Well, good evening and welcome to Kase Filters UK's fortnightly Sunday session. It is February the 28th and I'm here tonight with Chris Sale, who I will introduce you to in just a moment. But welcome to the evening. I'm seeing people in the chat already pouring in, so you're very welcome. Let us know where you're tuning in from as well. It's always nice to know. Just before we start though, let me give you a few items of just your basic housekeeping. If you've been here before, I'm sure you know all about it. But just to say, if you do have any questions throughout the next half hour or so for Chris, do leave them in the chat there. There is a little bit of a delay just between you popping them in and us getting them on this end. So if we don't respond straight away, give us a little bit of time and hopefully we'll get round to those. But feel free to use the chat for that or for chatting to each other, whatever you like. And you can also catch this again just after we finish tonight on the Kase Filters UK YouTube page. So if you want to share it or just watch again, then feel free to do that as well. But I think that does. So let's start. I'm seeing people pouring in from all over the place. So USA, people in from across the pond as well. Chris, you've obviously got a lot of fans from all over the shop. Chris, you are based in the Lakes, pro landscape photographer and Kase UK partner as well. So very much looking forward to chatting with you tonight. Just first up, Chris, obviously the past year has been unexpected for most people. I know you just turned pro, didn't you? In was it the tail end of 2019?
Yes, it was. Hi, Ruth. Lovely to meet you. Yeah, I went pro about 18 months ago, and it's been a challenge.
Yes. It's probably not how you foresaw your first year or so.
No, not really. And I think one of the things that I thought when I first went full time was that, regardless of what happened, at least I'll be able to get out and shoot.
Yes.
So that proved to be wrong as well. Brilliant.
Chris, we're going to just launch into it. We've got 10 questions tonight, as usual. So if you're ready to go, let's just jump in with the first ones. And just about yourself, for those who haven't met you, I know lots of people on here obviously know who you are, but how did you first get started, Chris, in photography?
So I started photography back in 2006. I've been doing it for about 15 years. It was the year I got married.
That's when you were a teenager, I was going to say.
If only. And my wife and I, we dropped an absolute fortune on the wedding, and we went on honeymoon, and we thought, well, we better get some nice photos, of this honeymoon that we did. So I could have got a camera and sort of tried to learn as much as I possibly could about sort of how to take decent photos, and I was really hooked from there. It's one of those things that just instantly clicked. It was like the missing piece to the jigsaw, I think, in many ways.
You're an outdoors man, obviously. I mean, what turned you, and what prompted the decision to actually go full time?
So I had a very long career in technology and IT. I actually ended up working for Sky TV in Livingston, in Scotland, West Lothian.
Okay.
And we moved up from. I'm originally from Buckinghamshire, just north of London, and we moved up in 2010. We bought our place here in the Lake District in 2012, and between 2012 and 2019, I had this kind of split life where I was working away from home, and my wife was here. And we did that for a number of years, and we were on honeymoon in Cuba, and we were just sort of sat around having a few drinks, and Helen, my wife, said to me, she said, just sort of off the cuff, she said, this is the first time we've spent 2 weeks together in 6 years.
Oh.
And there's nothing in it other than that, but there was a thought that stayed with us. And I think after we got back, she sort of said, I think we want to look at trying to get you here full time, make some changes full time. And I delivered some big projects at work. At Sky, I'd got to the level of principal engineer, so I couldn't go any higher without going into management. And done 20 years. Change, and she said, well, it was actually her idea that I give the photography a go. And I didn't need asking twice.
That's not usually the way it happens, is it? Usually it's
not a
decision they have to work somebody around. So, Chris, we've got a question on the chat already. Who were your biggest influences photographically, and were there any of the great masters that have inspired you?
Now, I know why that question has been asked. My last webinar, I did a webinar last month about 9 photographers who've inspired me. And,
okay. You've got an answer then.
Yeah, absolutely. So inspiration is it's a tricky thing for photographers. I think we need to be very careful about, if we're inspired. And certainly when you're first starting out, I think it can be kind of disillusional to look at other people's work and you think, I'm never going to be that good. And also, we want to be very careful about how we're influenced. So looking at other photographers' work is only something I've really kind of started to do relatively recently, since I've got secure in my own work and happy in my own style starting to emerge. But probably the photographer that's had the biggest influence on me from a kind of approach point of view and a compositional kind of point of view and what I like to photograph is Michael Kenner. Now, despite the fact that, he's a predominantly black and white photographer and he shoots film and medium format and all that kind of stuff. But he has kind of very simple, very strong compositions, often featuring a very strong primary subject. And that's something that we see in my work. And he also likes to combine man-made structures with the natural world, which again is something that I sort of gravitate towards. So I'd say Michael Kenner, definitely.
Okay, great. Well, hopefully that answered your question. Now, I mean, you said recently, I was noticing on your social media that you don't necessarily shoot over the kind of summer period. And I noticed that lots of your images, lots of moody, overcast images, which I know is kind of UK weather anyway. But are those your favorite shooting conditions, or are you working with what you've got? What's your favorite kind of shooting conditions?
I typically don't like to work with too much direct light. I like to work with soft, diffuse light. I typically go for a sense of tranquility, of calm in my images, and I think this comes from my time when I was as an amateur. Photography was an escape from that kind of that rat race, that kind of corporate world, and I think that came into my photography. I was always looking for that calm and tranquility. So that I think probably my favorite conditions is no wind. I don't like trying to work in high winds, but I think since I've become let's say full-time.
You can say professional.
Let's say professional.
You can say professional.
Since I went pro, I think we have to be able to work in all kinds of conditions. There's nothing worse, is there, than when you're with someone and they're moaning about the light. And it's just get on with it.
It's your job. Figure it
is
out.
kind of exactly. Yeah. So I'm getting better at working in all different kinds of conditions, and they all throw up their different challenges. But for me, if I'm looking at the weather forecast and we've got full cloud.
Great. And no wind. Perfect.
No wind.
A question in again, this is from Keith. Chris, what's your most regrettable purchase of kit since you started doing photography? So not necessarily since pro, but just in general.
Really good.
Don't say a Kase filter because shut off early.
I'm really, really good with kit. I mean, I changed cameras I've been shooting for 15 years and I'm on my second DSLR. So that tells you I don't change kit very often.
Good man. This is why your wife didn't mind you going pro, I'm assuming.
Not at all. Absolutely not. She's absolutely fine with it. I don't think I've ever really regretted anything. I think, I had a bit of a bag fetish when I first started out, and it took me a long time to get anywhere near the perfect bag. So I think I must have 15 camera bags somewhere. Unfortunately, the one I've got now is very good and it works for me brilliantly. But I've got somewhere. I never found a good bag, so it took me long.
Yeah, you and every other photographer I have ever met. I think it's the one thing you can be good with equipment, but when it comes to bags, I don't know if anybody yet has found the perfect bag. If you have in the chat, let us know. And
one I've got at the minute is pretty
pass
good.
The word on.
I've forgotten what it is. The most important thing for me. Most important thing for me for a camera bag is being able to fit my tripod on it. And I use I've got an enormous Benro tripod. So I'm nearly 2 meters tall. I'm a big lad. And my tripod extends above my head height.
Wow.
So I've got a big tripod. So the most important thing for me was being able to find a bag that fit my tripod.
Interesting. I mean, that's not something you often think about considering when it comes to a bag. Usually it's what's inside it, but it's being able to hang it off the outside. Everyone's got their different requirements, don't they? There's another question, Chris, from Julian. What do you miss most about being an amateur photographer? That's an excellent question, actually, Julian.
Is that my mate, Julian?
Julian Baird? Yes. It's your mate, Jules.
What do I miss? So Jules, Julian and I are very, very good friends, very, very close. And
I'm stealing that question. That's a really good question.
It's a good question, isn't it? I think so. The thing is, when I first went full time, Julian and I, our paths have been so closely linked. We kind of met through photography. We started YouTube at roughly the same sort of time. He was a bit before me. And we started with the same age. We started photography around the same sort of time. And our relationship, our paths have been so closely linked. When I went full time, probably the biggest the thing that I would have liked was Jules to come with me. And at the same time, and I think probably the thing it can be quite lonely. I think I've gone from a corporate environment where I'm working in the office a lot and with lots of people, and now I spend most of my time in my office on my own or out on sales on my own.
Yeah,
so it does get a bit lonely, but fortunately, I speak to Jules once or twice a month, so that really helps. It's really good.
I mean, it's interesting. A lot of landscape photographers, they relish being out on their own, out in the hills. I mean, I know the office is something different, but it's great, isn't it, being able to take a mate out with you? And I suppose as a pro, that's not something you always have the luxury of being able to, have somebody there.
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoy the one-to-ones because you are out with someone. And don't get me wrong, I mean, I love being out on my own, and it's great. But it's when you first go pro, it's all the time.
Yeah.
You're on your own, in your office on your own. Shooting on your own.
Yeah.
It does get a bit lonely at times.
Yeah. Well, fair enough. Hopefully, Julian, that answered your question. I know you love the Lake District, and obviously big landscapes seems the more obvious way to do that, shooting big. Is that your preferred way of shooting, or do you like intimate landscape as well? Do you have a preference, or is it just whatever works for the situation?
I definitely started with the big landscape. That's what kind of appealed to me. That's what really kind of got me interested in photography, and the Lake District as well. Obviously, I mean it's a big landscapey kind of place, as is Skye, of course. But I think as the intimate landscapes is definitely hard. I don't think anybody would disagree with us there. I think as you progress as a photographer, you want to look for new challenges. You also want to look for ways of expressing yourself. And I think it's easier to do that in intimate landscape. I think it's easier to tell stories with intimate landscapes. So I think that we naturally gravitate towards it. Now, it's not something that I'm particularly good at, but I think it's something that's coming more and more and more into my work as I progress as a photographer.
I think, like you say, the big ones are easy to see straight off, but as you develop your artistic eye and things like that, it's something that comes along a wee bit later on in the journey. But there's some beautiful shots. I noticed a lovely one of it was a boat on a loch. I can't remember what it was called, but it was a lovely serene shot, and I was like, compared to not compared to the big ones, but it's just nice seeing that mix, I think, of the grand landscapes and then the kind of beautiful ones that make you feel something, which is lovely as well. Sam and Hannah are asking, if you couldn't photograph in the Lake District, where else would you most like to photograph?
So that's Sam and Hannah Bowes.
Yes.
Yeah, so they're, again, more good friends of mine. So the Lake District, it's a bit of a double-edged sword in that it's fantastic to photograph here, but it does make going anywhere else harder. And the other thing about I'm not a particularly good photographer in a new environment. So I find that my photography comes from lots of visits to a certain location, getting the feel of a place, that kind of thing. I'm not a particularly good natural photographer, so that makes it harder for me to travel as well.
Yeah.
I think we're so lucky here in the UK to have such a diverse range of landscapes. My mum lives on the North Cornish coast, so I sometimes go down there and hang out with Julian. So I guess I quite like that rugged North Cornish coastline.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask you something very similar in terms of favourite locations. I mean, is it the lakes, or do you have somewhere in your head anywhere in the world that you would actually love to go to?
As I've started to do more and more work with people in the US, I've started to learn more about some of the locations in the US, and I have friends in the US that I speak to on a regular basis through photography. And there are some, obviously, it's such a vast area. There are some areas. I think some of the areas around places like Pennsylvania, and you get up into the Hampshires, where New England, where they have those amazing autumn colours.
Oh yes.
So I think probably the US. If I were to go, if you were going to drag me out the Lake District, Julian's always saying he can't get me out the Lake District.
If someone were to invite you for a one-to-one workshop for 2 weeks in the northwest of the US during autumn, I'm sure you'd be.
I'd be there.
That'd be very nice. If anyone's on the chat and fancy some pro workshop time with Julian, then he's up for it. Phil would like to know, what is the hardest thing about doing photography on YouTube? Now, Phil, I would say you're one of the most natural YouTubers I think that I've seen, certainly in terms of your early stuff. I remember I looked at your first video and I thought, this guy can't be his first time, because, you know,
That's all been downhill since then.
it's that's exactly what it is. No, but just you're natural speaker, as I think everybody knows. But what is the hardest thing for you?
I think I must be the YouTube is so distracting. so photography, you know, in general is I think it's a difficult thing. I think the great thing about photography is it's very easy to pick up a camera and take a photograph, but it's very, very hard to master photography. And so YouTube is incredibly distracting. You're trying to think about, you're not just trying to think about the photograph you're thinking about how to tell a good story, what film your clips you need, what to say on camera. You know, you're thinking about the edit and all these kind of things going on in your head. And I think I must be one of the only people who's ever gone full-time professional as a landscape photographer who did it with only half their mind on the job, because the other half was thinking about video. And I actually backed off of YouTube a lot recently. I've been working on a big video which is coming out soon. And I've been out shooting without the distraction of filming myself, and it's been a revelation. I've really enjoyed it. The pressure's just not there.
Yeah, I know, especially when you're on your own. I mean, I know what it's like when we go out and shoot videos. You know, if you're going out with customers at all, you almost have to do stuff before you've started or after you've finished. You can't have your head in the same place when you're actually trying to be with somebody else and teach them. And obviously the same when you're trying to shoot for yourself. John would like to know, which filter do you use the most?
So I always have a polarizer on the front. And I might sometimes back it off, but I always have a polarizer on the camera. And I think that's probably the most important filter for any landscape photographer. But the one that probably gets the one that I would struggle to get rid of beyond that would be, I have a 2-stop soft edge grad. Because my camera's relatively old, and the dynamic range is relatively limited in modern standards. Yeah. So I think, most people, if you've got a modern camera, if you're shooting with a modern Sony or a modern Canon or a modern Nikon, you're going to have about 2.5-3 stops more dynamic range than I am. So I find I use a lot of grads.
Okay, fair enough. I've got a question about your favorite one later on, but we'll hang on to that one for a little bit later. I mean, you mentioned before about photographers that inspired you, but when it comes to your approach, is there any other kind of artists maybe that gives you inspiration, even musicians or painters or anything like that, or is it all just straight out of your own head?
I'm very, very careful about inspiration. So I'm very, very easily influenced, I think. So when I was a kid, if we go on holiday and I'd come back with an accent, I was very impressionable.
I'm the same. I am the same.
It's not that bad. It's not that bad.
You came back from America with a southern accent. It was not good.
Well, mine was Scottish. I came back with a Scottish accent, and I'm as English as they come. And funnily enough, when I was working in Scotland for all those years, I used to get very English. By Jove. So I tend not to try to take too much influence from other people. I've always been very, very careful about that. And so I'd have to say there isn't really any. I mean, I think obviously if you're a landscape photographer in the Lake District, you're obviously going to have seen paintings by Turner and that kind of thing. So
it's always maybe there in the back, but it's not kind of a
I try not to take too much direct inspiration from anybody else. So photography is a journey. We're all on this journey, and there seems to be this rush to get to the end. I prefer to take a sort of more pedestrian pace and allow my own thoughts and feelings and style to emerge slowly. And so I've been a professional for 18 months, but I've got another 20-25 years to get to where I need to be, where I want to go. So I'm in no tearing rush.
I was speaking to someone, I can't remember who it was actually, on one of these sessions, who edits to a certain type of music. I think they said, depending on the kind of process they're trying to do, which leads me on very nicely. I mean, I think, like nearly every landscape photographer I've spoken to, I think you prefer the kind of minimal touch when it comes to post-processing, trying to just kind of recapture what you saw at the time out of that raw file. I mean, is that true? Is that your approach to post?
I do try to, and sometimes I get it wrong. Jules and I did a video recently where I edited one of his videos and got it terribly wrong, and it looked.
I did see that one, yeah.
Yeah, it was a bit embarrassing, in many ways. But generally, it's a light touch. I think for me, because I tend to favour the kind of more overcast conditions, that my post-processing approach is very much about pushing contrast into the image, and trying to bring out the natural contrast that occurs naturally in the landscape. So I tend to I use clarity. I do push a little bit of clarity in there just to give those midtones a bit of a punch, and I think that comes from my preferred conditions.
Yeah. But generally just trying to bring out what you saw at the time.
Yeah, I think so. And I also edit very soon after I've taken the photo. I'm not like these people that leave it for and I never go back either. The photo's the done deal, usually within 24 hours, and then I never go back and never touch it again. That's it.
Oh, good for you. I mean, people are very different. I know, again, some people, they spend months or they leave it for a long time before they actually go to. I mean, what about when it comes to things like, controversial things, cloning things out, or I know people recently have been having discussions around sky replacements, technology, things like that. Are these just not things that you would consider?
I'm a digital photographer. I never really shot film at all. And so I've kind of matured with the digital technology. And I think that we have a responsibility to, if we're trying to portray something as being natural, then that's what we should do. I'm not a big fan of sky replacements at all. I've never done it, actually. I've never been tempted to. I'm not a big bright sky kind of guy anyway. And so it kind of was going to look a bit odd. As for cloning things out, I mean, I do clone things out. I typically will take, if you can't get clean edges to the frame on location, then I will take out the odd stone. I'm a big fan of stones in the foreground. And if you can't balance those up in location, then I will make sure that I clean up the edges, but that's it. It may be a bit of litter or something like that. I watched Nick and he was talking about, was it a salt bin in a particular photo?
Yes, a grit bin, yes.
Was that somebody, a grit? Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
So I don't know whether I would have taken that out or not.
I imagine bright yellow in amongst probably one of his Kerrang images. It takes the eye off straight away, doesn't it? So I guess it depends on, what you want the viewer to, come away from the image thinking about. But yeah, everyone's got different takes on post. Craig would like to know, Chris, sunrise or sunset, and why?
Definitely sunrise. I hate sunsets. I really hate them because I like the calm conditions, and predominantly we get here in the lakes. I don't know what it's like in the rest of the country, obviously, because I never shoot there. But I like it calm, and I like reflections, and I like still water. And generally, that's when you get a best chance of getting that in the morning than you do in the evening.
Yeah.
I'm also a morning person. So I tend to rise early. I like to get up and get out, and it's also quieter. So the summer we talked about earlier, I don't shoot a lot in the summer. I've started to do that obviously since I've been a professional, but the Lake District, particularly in June, July, and August, can be extremely busy. But if you're up for sunrise in July, you've got the place to yourself, and it's just magical to see the sun coming up at whatever it is, 4:30 in the morning. Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, and it's just the photography kind of rewards you of making the effort to seeing the landscape in the right time of day and the right time of year. So for me, sunrise. So I'm awful at sunsets. Terrible.
Fair enough, Craig. Hopefully that answered your question. Jed would like to know, Chris, do you print your own work?
I don't print my own work. No, it's an area that I've never gotten into. I don't really have the space for a printer in my office at the moment either. I actually use a printer in Scotland. I'll use Loxley, and they're superb. I mean, they're so good. And it's one of those things where you think, well, I'm probably.
Why would I? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, they have a range of different things that they can do that I can't. But what I like about Loxley is that you can get proofs from them for free. So if I have something that is going to go into my portfolio and ultimately be up for sale, then I can get some proofs and I can actually see it. And sometimes I'll actually make changes based on what Loxley have sent me, and they're great. And they do things like direct shipping, so I just send them the order and don't have to worry about it, like stuff like that. But so, Jules is a big printer. He loves his printing, and he would probably twist my arm at some point.
I saw Nigel Danson's last month and his giant prints, which he just happened to pull out, and it's impressive and it must look lovely coming out. But as you say, if you've got a good printer that you trust implicitly and they can do a far better job than you think you can, certainly in the beginning, then why not? So there you go, Jed. No, he doesn't at the moment, but he's being worked on apparently. Do you have a most memorable moment in photography, good or bad?
Yeah, well, when I watch these videos, these sessions with, I saw them with Nick and I saw the one with Alistair. They both talked about that big moment in their photography being when they met other people, and that's been the joy of doing YouTube. Has been the people that I've met through it, and obviously one of those was Julian. We met 3 years ago, getting on for 3.5 years, three and a bit years ago. And he was in the lakes, and we went up to Loughrig Fell in the centre of the Lake District. And Jules is very, very serious in his videos, but he's got a PhD in cocking about. And he was just brilliant fun. And we got on like a house on fire. And that was a big moment. And there's lots of other photographers that I've got to know through YouTube as well. It's people. This business is all about people.
Yeah.
That's the thing I've learned. Brilliant.
Excellent. Excellent answer. Hugh Albin would like to know, what is the most important thing that you've learned during lockdown that you're going to take forward once we are free?
So there's been a couple of things. So from a kind of photographic point, hello Hugh. Hugh's a mate as well. Another guy I've met through photography, and we sort of hung out in the lakes when he comes up. There's a couple of things. When we first had lockdown in March, I spent pretty much 2 months shooting exclusively in black and white, and I learned an awful lot about that, and tried to turn that kind of negative into a positive. And I've always been a color photographer. I've never really shot in black and white, probably because I don't come from a film background. I've never done any of that kind of film and processing your own kind of stuff. And I've got a little mirrorless camera, which makes it so much easier to shoot in black and white because you can put the picture style into black and white and it helps you to see. And I learned a huge amount doing that. The other thing on a business perspective was the importance of diversification and having multiple income streams. So when I started my business, I knew that. I knew I had to have multiple income streams and diverse income streams. But of course, once I got started and the one-to-one start rolling in and the workshops start rolling in, you go, well, this is great. I'm going to focus on here. Because what's the worst going to happen?
Yeah.
And then, of course, lockdown happens. And, I lost thousands of pounds of worth of business overnight, predominantly from people coming from the US and from Canada, which I get I had a lot of bookings. So that just went. And so from there, you have to start doing other things. So I think so is the diversification. So things like I do webinars, which people come along to, and I did a zine earlier in the year, which was very good. I do one-to-ones over Skype, that kind of thing. I think that diversification. That's definitely going to be. So when things go back again, I've got to resist the temptation, not just going hell for leather on the one-to-one again.
Yeah, on that same kind of note, if there was somebody just getting started out in landscape photography, as you were 18 months ago, is there a particular piece of advice that you have learned along the way? Obviously that's a lockdown specific. Well, it's not lockdown specific, is it? It's a good piece of advice in general. But is there something that you would like to, a tip or advice you would pass on to somebody just from what you've learned?
I think so. Nigel answered this question last time around, didn't he? And I think did he say get to know your camera?
Say that again.
Did he say get to know your camera? So you've got to learn how to operate your camera.
Yes, that was always I
think that's one of the most important things.
Go out there and play with it.
It should be about photography. Should be a little bit like driving, in that when you first start to drive, you're worried about what to do with the steering wheel, changing gear, and pressing the clutch, and all that sort of thing. But actually, eventually, when you become more experienced, it becomes second nature. So operating your camera should be second nature. You shouldn't have to think about it, because there's enough to be thinking about. There's enough with light and composition and subjects and all that stuff that matters. If you're fiddling around with your camera trying, where's this setting, where's that, you're kind of missing it. So the most important thing for me is that I try and teach people is to have a very good core, a good workflow that you repeat. So every time I take a photograph, I go through exactly the same workflow. So I'd have to think about it. Set your camera up, compose the image, set the focal length, focus, filters, bang.
Yeah. Have it in your head. Yeah, I mean, obviously landscapes is one of those genres where you maybe have a little bit more time than other types of photography to actually think about setting up things like that. Would you ever consider, or do you have any interest in any of the other kind of types of photography? I know Nigel said last time he'd done some street, I can't remember if it was street stuff or portrait stuff, but back in the day, which he hasn't dredged out for a long time. But are you pure landscape, or do you have any other kind of inclinations towards other genres?
Yeah, I'm definitely pure landscape. And obviously, when I first picked up a camera, I mean, I took a picture of anything. I tried everything. I tried sports. I tried portraiture. I tried all sorts of things. But for me, it's that desire to take photographs is about the landscape, being out in the landscape, and the Lake District is my first love. Photography is secondary to that, and I think the photography becomes a way of expressing that love, if you like, of place. And it's why I don't travel out of the lakes very.
Yeah, you love it.
Reason. Exactly that. Yeah.
Gordon would like to know: being self-employed, do you find you're able to switch off and get time away from business matters? No,
not at all.
Answer that as well.
I've never ever worked so hard in my life for such a little return. But it doesn't feel like work, because I do love it. Yeah, I do love it, and I love the photography. I love working with people. One of the best things in life is being able to take somebody and help them to create an image of their own. I love that. That's absolutely fantastic. But then there's all the stuff that goes around with running a business, and
you're the only one there.
Yeah, absolutely. We have to do everything counts. I think I spend more time doing marketing than anything else. Almost everything that we do on social media and YouTube and Instagram and all that kind of stuff. It's all kind of marketing to a certain degree.
Yeah, I mean, you said at the beginning of one of your videos on YouTube, I know that you were going to spend a long time just upping your camera skills, but there's a lot more, isn't there, when you're the kind of one trying to make the pro life happen than just being a good photographer. Which I think a lot of people don't maybe twig at first. They might think, I love the landscapes, I love the outdoors, I could make a go of this. But actually, that's one skill set. There's 80% that's actually, like you say, marketing and all that stuff that goes around with it. Yeah,
I think if I was being honest, I think that there are plenty of photographers out there who are better photographers than I am. But I don't think that that's the barrier to being a professional.
Absolutely not.
I think you have to do all that businessy stuff, and you have to market yourself, and you've got to be able to get on with people. And a lot of landscape photographers, bless them, are grumpy buggers. You can't be a grumpy bugger in this business. No. You have to be somebody who is jovial, who gives the client a good time. Making sure that they enjoy themselves. And so there's lots to it. And when you look at, obviously Nigel is obviously a big inspiration. You see what success he's made of his business. Mine's very different. I'm not as reliant on the YouTube and the video teaching side of things as he said he was. But also Marcus is obviously a big inspiration to a lot of us. If you're looking at somebody who has made a very good business in this industry, then Marcus is a big inspiration to a lot of us.
Yeah, we're rapidly running out of time, Chris. Got just a couple of questions before we go. I mean, obviously you talked about loving the lakes, loving being outside. Do you have any hobbies besides photography?
I've gone right off rugby recently.
You got off rugby?
We lost to Wales yesterday.
Oh, you did you? I don't keep up with rugby, but I know a lot of people.
Off rugby. Yeah, again, so photography was obviously my big hobby, and then I went full time, and I work all the time. I don't really have a lot of time for it.
No time for any more hobbies. Finally, and I know we kind of touched on this earlier, do you have a favorite Kase filter, and why is it?
Yeah, it's got to be that two-stop soft edge grad. Never take a photo without a polarizer on, but you know that soft edge grad. You know, you working in the mountains, without direct light, in this overcast sky, that just pulls that back, and it does mean I haven't got to upgrade my camera.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, just very briefly, just looking ahead, obviously if lockdown lifts, which I'm sure it's going to soon, do you have any future plans or ambitions? I mean, I know you're running a project just now for 2021. Is it called 12 significant photos?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, just quickly, what's that about?
So I wanted to run a project for 2021, and I'm big into projects. I think once we get to a certain level, photographers really should stop thinking in terms of a series of images, not just the individual one. But that's what marks us apart from others. So I wanted to do a project, and I was kind of inspired by the great Ansel Adams. He had a quote that 12 significant photographs in any one year is a good crop. You know, and I think a lot of us, we put a huge amount of pressure on ourselves to go out and take photographs and come back with something. But if the great Ansel Adams understands that 12 in a year is a good thing, then so I thought to myself, well, what would happen if I just focused all my attention on trying to get 12 good images? What would that come out like? So I was all set up to go at the beginning of the year. I picked 12 locations throughout the Lake District, and then of course lockdown happened, and so I had to rein my plans back in again. And what I've done is I've ended up selecting 12 locations inside the parish where I live. So within the parish I live in Shap, just on the edge of the Lake District, and within the parish, it does extend into the national park. And so I put together a kind of webinar, just saying this is what I'm doing, and trying to inspire other people to take on a project. And the plan of the project is to get 12 photos throughout the year that show how this landscape changes throughout the seasons.
Yeah,
one image, 12 locations, one from each location, one a month, kind of jobby. But a few guys seem to be kind of interested in doing that. And so we've kind of set up a gang, and we meet virtually once a month. And we've got photographers from all over the world who are kind of doing the same thing. I'm trying to see what I can do when we finished, and if everybody completes it, what we can do. Can we have some kind of virtual exhibition, or can we get some kind of eyes on it? So that's the big
12
thing.
Also a good number for a calendar.
Exactly, of course, absolutely. One a month, trying to show the seasons as the landscape changes. Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. Well, I mean, Chris, where can people find out more about your project, but just yourself in general? Obviously, you're a YouTuber. You've got a website, social media. What's the best place to find you?
Always my website, chrissale.co.uk.
That's it. Links to everything off there.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Chris, thank you so much for chatting. It's been a real pleasure, actually, over the last half hour. And thank you to everyone as well that has asked questions in the chat. It's been really good speaking to everybody. But that's about all that we have time for tonight. This session will be available to watch again very, very soon, right here on the Kase UK YouTube channel. So do check that out if you want to catch up or share it with any of your friends. We will be back on the 14th of March, double checking there, with award-winning mountain photographer Nick Livesey, who is based in Snowdonia. So 7 p.m. on the 14th, so do tune back in for that. And don't forget as well, Kase Filters UK will be at the virtual photography show. The big one's not, I don't know if it's going to be on or not yet, but the virtual one, which is next weekend, 6th and 7th of March. So if you are thinking of getting any filters, they will have some special deals on. Keep an eye on their website, kasefilters.com, for more information. But anyway, there you go. That's it from me. So from me, from Chris, and from everybody at Kase Filters UK, thanks for joining us, and see you in a couple of weeks, hopefully. Good night.
Bye.
Bye.